Billion. Okay.
All right, here we are. Here we are. Welcome everybody to this episode of 39 Down. 39 Down tells my age. Actually, that was when I started this. No longer 39, but we'll just keep it. That's 39 Down. This is our journey to a full, abundant life, mind, body, spirit, everything. And so I am glad that you have joined us today. And I have a special guest for you today. I'm going to introduce him, and then he's going to tell us even more about himself. So I have with me psychotherapist, licensed social worker, clinical social worker, Mario Broussard, and he is, let me read, the president and owner of Fresh Start Counseling LLC, and also the co-founder of Ray of Hope Love Incorporation. He resides in Washington, D.C. So he is a graduate of Southern Adventist University and Howard University. He is a former producer and co-host of Let's Pray on the Hope Channel Network. And he has been privileged to speak um, in the United States, in Africa, in the Caribbean on the issues of faith, of race, social justice, mental health also. And he has served as a keynote speaker for the Department of Justice Federal Bureau of Prison on addressing trauma in the criminal justice system. So it's an honor for me to have you. Welcome on the show. Welcome on the show. And I felt like you were fit to speak on what we're talking about today. You know, negative thought. You have um, talk about trauma. You've talked about negativity, about rising up above all those things. And so I am glad that you are here today.
Dillian, thank you so much. It's a blessing. It's an honor to be here. And thank you so much for thinking of me for this topic. And it's just, I'm excited about our conversation today.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's get right in. So, tell me a little bit more. You know, I ask everybody, how did you even get into the field that you're in? You tell me a little bit more about your journey, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Certainly. So, I think that the mental health field really called me. I wasn't looking for it so much. I think that I was drawn to it from a young age. In fact, I remember as a kid watching television, and one of the people that inspired me, ironically, was Dr. Phil, and I just said in my heart when I was probably about 9, hey, I'd love to have a television show where I'm doing what Dr. Phil is doing. The second part to it was that I guess my whole life, I don't know if I wear a sign on my back or on my forehead that says, come talk to me about your problems. But it has just been kind of the nature of how my life has gone. And so at one point I was like, you know what? I think I might as well get paid if I'm going to continue to do this. And so,
Right.
that began a track down the road of psychology in my undergrad. But then I saw just the intimacy that the field of social work has and promotes, specifically at Howard University. And I loved that mindset and the track that they had their scholars on. And so social work called me into that, and I was able to marry it with the clinical aspect. And so it's probably been about 7 years now that I've been practicing. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, let's talk about our topic, negative thoughts. One thing that I've noticed is that some people sometimes they say, "Oh no, I'm positive. I'm going forward. No problem. I don't have any negativity about me. Things like that." Now, what are negative thoughts, and then how can we actually recognize the negative thought? Because it seems to me that just about everybody has a little bit of negative thoughts going on, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to address that first part that you talked about when there's kind of a culture now that is promoting, at least on social media, this idea that I'm not going to have any negativity around me, and I think that it's great. There's no but to that. I do think though that culture it has gone largely unexplained or really even misunderstood. And it's a great question you're asking. What is a negative thought? Because the science of negative thinking really focuses in on the understanding that negative thoughts are lingering thoughts that don't have any positive end to them, so to speak. And so it's almost this, not everything that we think it is negative is necessarily negative. I think that there are some things that we go through in life that elicit the next or the obvious next thought to be something that's not positive. I mean, if you fall down and scrape your knee, it's something as simple as that. You're not going to have a positive outlook about how that feels instantly, right? But it's what I do with the circumstance over time that determines whether or not it's a negative thought. And so sometimes we beat ourselves up for having a natural reaction to something that takes place in life. And I really want to clarify that because not everything that we feel is negative is always such. Sometimes our response or our thought process to something happening is a natural and appropriate response. And I really I'm lingering here on that because if we're not able to identify those thoughts as such, those natural consequences or thoughts as such, then we begin to build up shame for thinking the way that we think. And I think we've just lumped a lot of our thoughts that aren't necessarily utopian or ideal or positive, overtly positive, as something negative, when in actuality, if I found out tomorrow that I had cancer, God forbid, I'm going to have subsequent thoughts after that I think it would be quote unquote abnormal to not address or sit with for a while. And so I just want to clarify that negative thoughts or negative thinking is a result of what we do over time. I think that's how it's classified, as opposed to how we're feeling in the moment about something.
Yeah, that's a good point because we tend to think, I'm not thinking negative, or I'm pushing away, I'm ignoring the negative thought or the reaction. It is actually something natural,
Right.
It is natural, and actually sometimes sitting with them and understanding them a little bit can help us instead of canceling our cancel culture. I just don't, I don't do negative, so therefore none of that.
Right.
None
right.
of that is on my concern. But really, there is value in identifying these negative thoughts, and so how you explained it, is very good. There's more to it than we think.
Yeah, and before we move on, I kind of also want to just highlight for marginalized groups, minorities, people of color. We have a history, especially in most parts of the world, but in our context in America, we have a history with negativity.
Mhm.
that we didn't bring on ourselves, right?
Right.
And yet
Right.
we've been expected to navigate through
Mhm.
um, and perform at high levels under situations of oppression, marginalization,
Mhm.
inequity, and so we've been programmed. I look at so many of the people that I looked up to as a child, adults,
Mhm.
grandparents, people in my church, and
Mhm.
they trudged through and they pushed through so
Right.
many obstacles, right? That if they had a situation that would have been catastrophic for any other group of any other individual, they almost glazed over it and just quote unquote powered through.
Mhm.
But we're not able to do that. We're not programmed to do that
Right.
long
Right.
term. We have the fight or flight, and
Mhm.
that's supposed to be temporary, that adrenaline that allows us to power through negativity or negative experiences. But it's not supposed to be permanent. And I think sometimes my point is in all of this, sometimes marginalized, oppressed communities often downplay some of the trauma that they've been through, and we don't see it or even recognize those types of traumas that we've been exposed to or been through. And therefore, we don't allow ourselves to even sit with it, to even to do anything positive with it as a
Yeah. Yeah.
result.
And and we talk about the certain race groups being predisposed to having a genetic makeup for the high blood pressure and the diabetes and mental illness and all those different things, and we say, oh, it's just it's my sugar, or it's just. But
Mm-hmm.
when you think about being in that constant fight or flight, right, all the time, your body is not processing anything really properly, right? The food, yes, the type of food factors in, but
Right.
then also your state of mind,
Yeah.
your constant stress is affecting you in ways that we don't even think about, right? And
Uh,
it's generational,
yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. In my own family, I've recognized that the women in my family,
Mhm.
historically, going back at least 3 or 4 generations, have been predisposed to so much trauma within their own upbringing and then in their marriages,
Mhm.
that there seems to be a line of dementia that
Yeah.
occurs at some place because, like you said, they're in constant fight or flight.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to be in those subjected to those circumstances
Yeah.
on a regular basis. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Dementia, Alzheimer's, the high stress, and the trauma, which
Yeah.
which is a reaction to all those things that are happening. All of that is causing and cancer and all of those different things that again we don't make the link
Right.
between those things, right? But
Yeah.
but so important to be able to process this information, process what's going on with us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not as obvious then. It's not as obvious as we as we
Right.
think. Negative thoughts are just kind of laced intertwined into our mind and our daily lives then.
That's right. Yeah. They are. And I'm sorry, I had a little audio issue. I didn't hear if you were asking me a question.
No, I
Okay.
wasn't. Just
Okay.
keep
Okay. Gotcha.
just keep it
Gotcha.
going. That's
Gotcha.
fine. So give us some more examples though of how does you give some examples, but for people to be able to maybe identify and put a finger on their negative thoughts and how they manifest. Give us just some more examples day to day. How can negative thought affect us? Kind of take over.
Sure. Yeah. First off, one of the things that I said at the very beginning was that I kind of define, and I think that the science kind of defines um, negative thoughts as those types of thoughts that are negative
Mm-hmm.
continuously. It's over time,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the ways that we can really know that that's kind of our train of thinking, and it's easy. I want to say also, it's easy for us to begin to develop a habit of thinking negatively
Mhm.
at first. And that
Right.
means, and every time you hear me say that, I mean, I'm talking about thinking negatively over time,
Mhm.
over a time period. And so, as much as we can train ourselves to think negatively, we can
Mhm.
also train ourselves to think positively. And
Yeah.
so I want to encourage somebody out there that you may have more of a pessimistic outlook. And I
Mhm.
don't want to downplay anyone's circumstances. I think in many circumstances, our our life issues, the things that we've experienced in our lives, have led us to the certain habits of thinking that we have. And so
Yeah.
if you've lost individuals, several individuals, then it's it's more of a natural consequence that you're going to think negatively about the safety of others, and the list can go on about the different types of ways we can think. But I want to encourage somebody who feels like and recognizes maybe they have more of a pessimistic mindset, that as
Mhm.
much as your experiences and your conclusions have led you to that way of thinking, there is hope for you to begin to reverse. And I want to
Yeah.
also be sensitive to the fact that what I'm not saying is that um, you should get yourself to a place
Yeah.
where everything's always positive, because rarely in life can we ever use never, always, or everything, because that life's just not that consistent. But I
Mhm.
do believe that we can begin to climb out of the hole of negative thinking as our first and prolonged mindset.
Mhm.
And so some of the ways to identify negativity. So one of the methods I use in my therapy sessions um, is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a
Mhm.
common form of therapy. But we have to first, it states that we have to first identify our distorted thinking, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have those distortions, and some of those distortions um, are what they call black and white thinking. So
Mhm.
black and white thinking is deciding in your mind that everything is either one way or it's
Mhm.
another way,
Right.
and that there's no in between.
Mhm.
And we know that life is rarely like that.
That's
Um,
true.
and so that's one of the ways that we kind of get ourselves caught in negative thinking, because we say, well, it's either what I'm going through is going to end this way or it's going to end that way. And
Mhm.
and rarely do we get those opportunities in life to where it's that black and white. And so to be able to say, to look down the road of the possible outcomes of your circumstance and to say, you know what, as much as I can think negatively about the fact that I don't know how it's going to end, I
Mhm.
can also use that same approach to
Mhm.
to foster hope
Yeah.
that because I don't know how this
Mhm.
is going to end, I have an opportunity to come out of this in a positive
Mhm.
light.
Right.
Yeah,
Being more open to the outcome and not just boxing into it's going to be bad, right? It's
that's
most
right.
likely going to be bad. Well, you don't know. You don't know. You
No,
don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
no, and I want to share this, so in 2019, and I really feel like God has led this conversation to this point. In 2019, we lost our daughter
Mhm.
after 7 days of her being alive. She was born. You know, um, I have to say, Delian, that I thought all the way up until the day that we had to choose to take her off of life support, I had hope that something would turn around.
Mhm.
And it was the first time that I had thrown in 100% faith in something that I could not see or determine, and I
Mhm.
did not get the outcome that I desired.
Right.
And
Right.
so when we're talking about negative thoughts, I'm not just talking theoretically here. This is something that I've had to go through. And so I really had to practice some of the things that I've been preaching
Mhm.
as it pertains to me not allowing my mind to get stuck in the
Mhm.
reality of what took place versus what
Right.
I was hoping. And so
Mhm.
I think that choosing to hope in the midst of that 7 days where we were hoping our daughter would turn around is what helped me get through the 7 day, the brutal 7 days of the hospital trips, the roller coaster experience of she's doing better, now she's doing worse, and those types of things. And so I was caught off guard at the end when it didn't happen because I believed that it would.
Mhm.
However, when I look back on it, I believe that it was that mindset that I had that something good can still happen because she's still breathing. And I want to encourage somebody out there today that it only benefits you to have that mindset. And this is coming from a person who did not get the desired outcome. For the rest of my life, I will celebrate the life of my daughter on September 27th, 3 days before my birthday, and the passing of my daughter on October 4th, 2019, 7 days later. I will never forget that. So this is not pie in the sky that I'm trying to put out here. What I'm trying to say is, if I did not have the mindset that I attribute to God, I don't attribute it to myself entirely, through those 7 days, I think I would have been worse off in the end. And so not choosing to have a black and white approach is one method.
Yeah. And if you don't mind,
Sure.
continuing on that, then how did that mindset then carry through, the years now, it's been, almost 2 years. So you had the mindset, it carried you through the 7 days, but then somebody would say, well, I didn't get the outcome that I expected, that I wanted. And so now everything falls apart, but it did not. And in your life, how did that work?
Yeah. So first I've got to say that there is a time and a place for everything to fall apart. And when we took her off and she took her last breath, everything fell apart. And I allowed it. I mean, you can't really, it's not like I allowed it. It happened, but I chose not to fight everything falling apart. And so as much as I probably needed a solid month or two of mourning, really, life doesn't always afford you that. So, but I took 2 weeks, and Billy-Ann, I promise you, I didn't move off of my couch for about 3 days. The first 3 days, I didn't know what to do. I was so numb, and so, but the more that I sat there and thought about what was going on, and really began to try to process my feelings, the more I allowed myself to feel how I was feeling, the greater I think my probability was that I was going to recover. And it really showed that. So there's a scripture in Ecclesiastes that in the Bible that says, there's a season and a time for everything. And that's why I don't think we give ourselves grace and credit for understanding that. Yes, so I powered through in hope for those 7 days, but the subsequent few months after that, it was a roller coaster of I feel great today, now we're talking about grief, and then the next hour I might
not
be
so good.
And so allowing myself to go through that roller coaster, choosing to cut off work if I had the option when I wasn't feeling, because I'm a therapist, so how can I listen to your issues when I'm I'm falling apart. So choosing to have a balance and positioning yourself to be able to experience what it is that you're feeling. And then that kind of leads me, we'll talk about in the time how to overcome or how to combat negative thoughts. And so I'll talk about that in a second of how.
Right. Well, yeah. And it's a natural progression to it. You actually said what I was hoping you would say in allowing yourself to feel, to be aware, to feel about certain thoughts, to feel certain feelings, emotion, and then working through those things. Because again, a lot of people, and I've done that, and I think most people, we ignore or we shut down because we feel like you have to be strong right? You have to be
Right.
strong, and therefore, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm not going to feel anything. And I'll share in my part. I've shared that before, where for a long time, I didn't want to deal, and some of it is a little cultural, where you don't show your
Mm-hmm.
emotions so much. You have to have a certain decorum, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to show certain things, and then I just decided I wasn't just not gonna deal with them. But what I did is I was never too high, never too low, just right
Mm-hmm.
and steady, not allowing myself to feel, to think about, it's just like I gotta be functional, right?
Yeah.
And so to be functional, I can't get too excited. I'm never gonna be the life of the party, even if now probably still not, but I'm never gonna be the life of the party.
Right.
But I'm just not gonna allow myself to sink too low either, because I have things to do. And so we get into, we talked about, the women, in your family, and in the I would say the Black, not just African American, but just the
Right.
African diaspora, where we just, and in our other cultures too, we just don't allow ourselves to be too high or too low, because we have to do what we have to do. But I'm glad that you said that, allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to identify and recognize what you're feeling. And I like Tisho's comments here. Tisho said, what people don't understand is that constant fight or flight depletes the body from certain minerals and vitamins. Yeah, and sometimes when we are, in my lab, trying to just stay steady, that's still fight or flight. It's a defense mechanism, and we don't
That's
think
right.
about it that way. We don't think
Yeah.
about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's it is. It's a defense mechanism. So it's meant for survival in those short bursts.
Mhm.
And Tasha, I see you saying shout out to social work. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't put that one. We put you on here. Shout out to social work.
Yeah, yeah. So there's just so many. So another one in terms of identifying how we can, I guess, feed or foster negative thinking. Within that vein, personalizing things, and what I mean by that is assuming that you're the one to blame for the
Mhm.
circumstance.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and I think in some circumstances, we may be guilty of bringing something onto ourselves.
Mhm.
But there are often a lot of circumstances in which, we're not, we don't, our hands are tied. We don't have very much power. And so in the outcome or the say of that circumstance, and so we then, in order to, in our search for answers, we
Mhm.
decide to pin it on ourselves when we can't
Yeah.
find any.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's only going to, that's not going to be positive as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a danger too. The way you put meaning and assimilate certain things. It's one thing, an event or something that somebody says or whatever. It is what it is, and then the way we're taking it in, we adding
Yeah.
sometimes negative meaning to it, or we adding extra load to it, or different things that are more destroying us, that they need to be. They need to be.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
do we, give us some tips? Give us
So
some
how
tips.
do we overcome them? So,
Yes.
yeah. So to answer your question, I'm going to also list another way in
Okay.
which we foster those negative thoughts. And so another one is that we filter. And to filter in cognitive behavior theory, it means that basically we're choosing to only see the negative side of the thing. And it's kind of linked to the black and white.
Mhm.
It's related in that regard, but we're choosing to only see the negative side of things. And so one of the things that if we can choose to see the negative side, then we can also choose to hope or find positivity out of it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this is where I want to challenge us in this place, because sometimes we throw pity parties for ourselves and just say, you
Been
know,
there.
my loved one passed, or I have a I have a disease or something like that, and I am not downplaying what we go through by any means, but by the very nature, if we can choose to see it negatively, then we also have the option to see it
Yes.
positively. And
Yes.
and I'm not just stating that. I know that a lot of times it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where this culture of when we talk about not entertaining negativity comes into place.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things that I feel we can do is surround ourselves with individuals and community, if possible, who are positive minded about things.
Okay.
Um, Not the individual who tells you it's going to be okay, and that's just their natural, thought process, but that person that will sit with you in the midst of what you're through and what you're feeling, and then also help you decide that there's a time and place for everything, that we're going to sit in this now, in our
Mm-hmm.
sorrow, in our
Right.
fear, in the obvious negative aspect of this circumstance. But
Mm-hmm.
now we're going to get up and go to get something to eat.
Right.
Now we're going to develop a 5-step plan to combat this.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Yeah.
we're going to pull ourselves out, so we can choose to sit in it for a while, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is healthy. And then that person or that support system will help you choose to begin to make steps towards repairing, fixing,
Mm-hmm.
combating it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's one way, surrounding ourselves with individuals who are going to identify what's going on with us, but not allow us to stay there.
Exactly. Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So
But
empathy with action.
that's right. That's right. And I think that those are the healthiest individuals in our lives. When we're talking about not having negativity around us, those are the healthiest individuals in our lives. The ones that will not allow you to downplay what you're going through. That's, I think, is as important in this
Right.
process of coming out of negative thinking. They're
Yeah.
not going to allow you to downplay what you're going through. They're going to confront
Mhm.
you about it in love, with empathy, and say, hey, you're acting like everything's okay, and I know that it's not. You
Right.
know, so
Right.
what can we do? I'm here to listen.
Mhm.
And then, like we said, then that person will also help you move, into a place of solution focus
Right.
for your issue. Yeah.
Now you said something. You said something there that it triggered a thought. You said acting like everything is okay. Like oftentimes when we talk about negativity, we're always thinking about the drags. Like okay, they can't be complaining. But you always also have the people who are battling, who do not know how to deal with negative thought, and all they do is like, hey, I'm here,
Right.
I'm the love of the party, I'm so excited, I'm so happy, I'm so always so excited. And you're thinking, man, I need some excitement in my life too. But they
Right.
are actually, compensating, overcompensating,
Yeah.
uh, for other, for negative thinking and the negative burden too. I just kind of came to me when you said that, when you said you're acting like everything is okay. So that's another way, it's not, again, not as obvious as we think, as that it is. But the key is, we do have to sit with those thoughts. We do have to confront them, right?
Yeah.
We can overcompensate. We can be low. We can be high. We can be steady, no feelings. There's so much that, how it can affect our lives. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think, when it comes to our mind,
Mhm.
um, we don't give ourselves enough credit for the needs of our mind and our heart and our emotions. Everything in the world filters.
Mhm.
um, Trees filter, through photosynthesis. Our cars, they filter gas and oil. Everything around us filters in and out. Something goes out, something
Yeah.
comes in, and when it doesn't, everything around us, when those processes and syntheses do not happen,
Mhm.
then you have something go wrong with organisms or automobiles or planes.
Right.
And the root of all of those processes come from how we studied and how we know our bodies to be. And so
Mhm.
we allow room for things to go out and come in, with everything around us, but we don't hold ourselves to the same standard. And so
Mhm.
those individuals who portray everything as okay are the ones that are at the greatest risk,
Mhm.
um, for their lives to end, whether it be through chronic stress that leads to heart, issues, or some type of physiological issue, or, God forbid, suicide,
Right.
because they're not allowing things to go out, and they're not
Mhm.
allowing thoughts to come in, and
Yeah.
it has to come out.
Mhm.
It has to come out at some point.
It has to come out in the natural world, like you said. Trees. We talk about trees, but like they emit expression and sound, and they tell all the trees what's going on. They have a
Yes,
whole and the roots
yes,
are not just for nutrients. The roots, they talk to each other, right?
yes,
It's crazy.
yes.
Trees talk to each other.
That's right.
And animals, when they get into fight or flight, they run and do what they have to do. Some, I forget, these animals that I don't know if it's the possum or armadillo or one of those
Uh-huh.
that we would kill. Unfortunately, it happens. But they actually found that when they get the danger, they may freeze or they run or whatever, and then they notice that what they do when they're out of the danger, they
Uh-huh.
scream. They
Wow.
scream,
Wow.
and then they go on about their business.
That's right. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes, and zebras and any they'll run and do what they have to do. They'll let it out, and then they go back to grazing. They go
That's
back to
right.
life. We don't do that. We
No,
don't do that.
no. My son taught me in the process of losing our daughter how to grieve and how to deal with my negative thoughts, because he did something very similar to that. When we came home and informed him, that his sister didn't make it, that she had passed.
Hmm.
But we had a gift that they were going to exchange gifts when she was born.
Yeah.
So we gave him the gift that she had gotten for him, which was a couple action figures or something like that. And
Yeah.
so he looked at the gift, and he looked at us, and he said, "This is from my sister." We were like, "Yeah, she
Hmm.
gave it to you, even though she's not going to make it. She didn't make it. She wanted you to have it."
Hmm.
He said, "This is from my sister." We said, "Yeah." And then he said, "She died?" And we were like, "Yes." And he
Hmm.
looked at it, and he smiled at the gift. Then he looked
Hmm.
at us, and he cried because his sister passed away.
Right.
He hugged us, and
Hmm.
he took his toy, and he ran off. It's like he
Wow.
taught me there.
Yes.
Sometimes you need to stop and
Hmm.
cry, think
Hmm.
about what's going on, and
Hmm.
then go play, or then choose to go about your business, and
Yeah.
stop anytime you need to. And he taught me how
Hmm.
to navigate through my negative thinking during that time.
Isn't
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's
it,
amazing. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So the other part that I wanted to talk about in terms of how we overcome negative thinking is, to practice gratitude.
Hmm.
Um, and,
Yeah.
and and I want to highlight, some of the most amazing civilizations and cultures in the world, um, that we've come to know and admire, did very well documenting their experiences. And there are so many documents in their own way, from Egypt's history,
Mhm.
but from Rome and from Greece, but also of Jewish history.
Mhm.
And one of the pages that I really have taken out of the book of Israel history, or Jewish history, is how they've documented their experiences.
Mhm.
And I think that journaling, or having some way of documenting what you've gone through,
Mhm.
allows you to cultivate gratitude, but you
Mhm.
can also be intentional about pausing and choosing gratitude in the midst of negative thinking.
Yeah.
And so we are, um, we are expecting another child.
Mhm.
And I shared with you just offline about that. But we are also now experiencing some complications with this pregnancy, right? So we've been in the hospital on and off for the last week with different procedures. Just for what context of what I'm talking about, the child, our baby girl, has an enlarged heart. She's anemic, and they've already found some of these things out. Her liver is enlarged because it's having to work so hard, and her blood count is low. So I'm
Mhm.
naming all these things because they have context. So this week, these are the types of thoughts that I've had to combat
Mhm.
over the last week. And how I've done it is I take those wins as they come.
Mhm.
So the doctor came back after some testing and said, hey, the fluid around your daughter's heart has gone down. The
Mhm.
enlargement seems to be going down, which means that there's something positive happening with her blood and her oxygen and things like that. And so we're hoping that this, and this happens. So I took that and I held on to it in
Mhm.
that moment because we had no wins last Friday, only
Mhm.
perceived losses.
Right, right.
This past Friday, we had some wins to think about. And so practicing gratitude is what helps you choose. It helps you climb out of the pit of negative thinking. That's another one.
And gratitude, as I'm learning, because gratitude, we tend to look at gratitude as, things that have already happened, right?
Yes.
But gratitude for the future is
Yeah.
also very important, because gratitude for the future, again, that's the alignment with faith. That's your
Yeah.
alignment with faith. So when you are expressing gratitude for something that is going to happen, and you're in agreement with that thing that's going to happen, that's so powerful. And so sometimes we like the tangible. We like to
Yeah.
see and say, I'm grateful for this, and
Right.
also oftentimes we do, what are you thankful for at night with the kids, and it's always things that we see, things that we know. But it's actually yesterday, I was driving and listening to a book, and the second time listening to it, and I'm finding more and more stuff, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do, maybe not every night, but I'm going to have them say what they're thankful for, something that they're in anticipation of,
Mm.
so I'm going to try that. And I
Wow.
think it will help me to practice too,
Yeah.
because we always say what we're thankful for, and it's my family, and they pick something in their room, like the baby, she's 3, she's like, well, and my crib, and my water, and my door, and my tent, and my, and she goes through everything in her room, and I say, okay,
Right.
what we're going to try now, because it's alignment with faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mind and
Mm-hmm.
heart coherence. I'm going to see if we can express gratitude for something that is to come, and living
Yeah.
as if it has happened. Yeah. So it goes, both are valuable in the, what has happened already, and what we're hoping, what we're praying, and what we have faith, believing, I should say, that will happen. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And that's powerful because when you really study development, development throughout, a lifespan,
Mhm.
I'm really starting to understand even more and see the results of how our childhood impacts our thinking moving forward, right? And so what you're getting ready to do is you're
Mhm.
getting ready to equip your children with yet another tool
Mhm.
to potentially pull in their tool belt when they need it to overcome,
Right.
because it's not about if in life, it's when it comes to negative things happening to us
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
challenging things happening to us.
Yeah. No matter how much we want to protect them, protect ourselves, it's going to
It's
happen.
going to. I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. In the midst of all this stuff, one day we were at the hospital and I got an alert on my phone right after we had gotten some not so great news, that someone had stolen our credit card. and had charged like $2,500 worth of worthless stuff,
Mhm.
and now in the midst of, on top of what we are going through, we're
Yeah,
having to navigate this next
do that.
experience. So
Wow.
life is relentless, but if we have those tools, or
Mm-hmm.
if we're choosing to develop those tools in our
Mm-hmm.
tool belt to pull when we need them,
Right.
those are the ways in which we are able to better overcome
Right.
um, negative thinking. Yeah,
Right. So gratitude and gratitude journal,
yeah,
journaling, at least being in gratitude for a while, but journaling makes even a bigger impression,
it does. Because
right?
because then it allows you to go back and look. Or if you're not the journaling type, if you could get like one of those whiteboards and put it up on a wall and
Mm-hmm.
just decide at some point in the day that you're just going to write something that
Right.
positive that happened in the course of that day, or like
Yeah.
you said, in faith, claiming
Mm-hmm.
that something is going to go well. That's
Mm-hmm.
a great way to really combat it. And another one that I wanted to point out was just focusing in on your strength.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
one of the core principles of social work in how we practice is what's called the strength-based perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do in terms of our care, in terms of our practice with others and our clients, comes from a strength-based perspective. And what I mean by that is focused in on empowering our clients
Mm-hmm.
to understand what they have at their fingertips, what resources they have. It's more so helping them to see what they have and not what they do not have or what they lack. It's also helping them understand who they are,
Mm-hmm.
so that they're able to know that I may be weak in this area, but I have a strength in this area that's going to help it. And so whenever you're going through something and negativity seems to be closing in, another way that you can combat it is taking some time and focusing on your strengths of what you do have and what you can do
Mm-hmm.
versus what you cannot. I think about Moses at the
That's a good.
burning bush, and
Yeah.
his whole thing was like, I don't speak very well. How can
Right.
I do this? And God kept using the strength-based perspective on Moses.
Right.
Moses, what do you have in your hand? I have a rod.
Right.
Put it down. And then he showed him, this is what I'm empowering you with for the journey that you're going through. So
Yeah.
God took a strength-based
Mm-hmm.
perspective
Mm-hmm.
with Moses, and that's another thing that has helped me.
That is, we read those stories, we tell the stories, and we know the story, right?
Yeah,
But it's always so amazing when we break it down in a way, in different way. We all know, well, he said, well, what you have in your hand, and then it became a snake, and then it took the snake back, and what is this? This is my hand. Okay, well, but what you just said is so important. The strength. What do you have?
yeah,
What are the tools that you have? What are the strengths that you have? What is the gift that I've given you? And
yeah,
and then focusing, zeroing in on that,
yeah.
instead of the negative. And as we do that, again, the balance, because the fight or flight, and then so the negative and the positive, or the what's the word I'm looking for, the negative fight or flight with the limbic system, as opposed to your frontal lobe with the reasoning and the connection
Mm,
with God, and the
yeah,
the solutions. They can't, you know they balance, right?
that's
So
right.
if you stay on the negative all the time, the negative is higher, right?
Right,
And your processing and your solutions, solving and all those different things is low. Your skill, your ability at the time is low. But then when you
right.
say, what do I have, like you said, my strength, it
Yeah,
changes, it shifts,
yeah.
and so the negative it's not like you're ignoring it, but you're
No,
switching, you're causing a shift,
That's right.
in your brain. Yeah.
Yeah, and look what happens on the opposite side of that. You're right. I love the fact that you pointed out the necessity of balance, because on the
Mhm.
opposite side, we can be focusing on our strengths. We can be trying to process and analyze, but we're not addressing the emergency at hand, right? And so that's where we begin to cover up, that we're going through something.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. We're good. I'm okay. God's got it or whatever. But he
That's a big one,
programmed us.
right?
Yeah, he programmed us to analyze, to pray, to have faith, and to get out of there, to move,
Mhm.
to do something about it if we need
Right.
to in the immediate moment. So that balance is
Right.
necessary. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's so powerful. Any other points? Any other any other tips
Yeah,
that
sure.
you
So the
have?
last point that I just want to
Mhm.
point out is, at some point we've got to realize that we cannot do it by ourselves.
Yes.
And there are some situations we can navigate just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But this process of choosing uh, to look at life positively, this process of climbing out of a negative thinking pattern, requires two things, I believe, in most cases, especially with the severity of the circumstance. It requires, and I'm actually doing a series with my local church called
Mm.
"I Need Jesus and My Therapist."
Is that
And
online? Is that
it it,
online?
it is. So
Okay,
I'm
so give me
facilitating the
information.
series,
Okay.
Capitol Hill Seventh Day Adventist Church,
Okay.
every Wednesday in the month of May, leading up to actually June 4th is the last day.
Okay.
But it's entitled "I Need the Battlefield of the Mind. I Need Jesus and My Therapist." And that's my last point, is that for those of us who are believers, one of the practical ways that we can use our faith is to understand that, yes, we need Jesus. So taking it to God, but also understanding that just like God can lead you to your doctor for your hearing issue, for for your heart issue, for whatever, he can also lead you to a good therapist to deal with the issues that are going on in the battlefield of your mind. And so to be able to use the resource of faith, of prayer, of biblical meditation, as well as going to see a professional. I say this in closing. I always say this: there are 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. And the implication of that is that God did not intend for us to live this life alone. If he
Mm.
did, he would put us on our own planet in our own galaxy.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to look around us with his help and the unction of the Holy Spirit, because our neighbor, the next professional, probably has a resource that we don't, that is
Yeah.
going to help us through this time. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. I'm glad that you made that point because, again, in certain cultures, it's about, well, you have to remain private, first of all. And then
Hmm.
I'm just going to, like you say, God got it. God is between God and I. We got this, and, and,
Yeah.
and we feel like, we can handle it. And when we cannot handle it, we still say, well, it is what it is, or this is
Right.
just how it's going to be. But there's so many resources out there, from social work, from counseling, from
Hmm.
uh, psychology,
Right.
psychiatry, from coaching, life coaching, health
Right.
coaching. It's so much out there. And yes, it can be confusing sometimes because you don't know where to look,
Yeah.
but you can try one thing, see how it's helping you, get the benefit from that, and say, then let me add something else or try something else.
That's right.
There's so many resources, and I'm glad that your church is doing that because we've ignored so much this aspect of mental health. and
Yeah.
and again, you just say we're just going to pray about it. Praying is important, but
Hmm.
guess what? God has given the knowledge and the wisdom that has been passed down
Right.
and it's taught, and there are professionals who know what to do. And
Yeah.
yes, God's got it. God has given somebody out there the tools, the skills to help you.
That's
That
right.
is God's answer too. You know,
That's right.
it doesn't have to
Hmm.
shine down from heaven. Uh,
Hmm.
you know,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
just like if you have cancer or whatever, and you're not just gonna say, well, God's got it.
Hmm.
You might go to a doctor, right?
Right.
Just at least to hear what they have to say.
That's right. That's right.
Right? So
Yeah.
if you have an issue with your mind, it is also important to look for, help professional. It doesn't mean you're crazy or you're
That's
not
right.
able or you're not capable. It just means that there are people who have studied and who have a knowledge that you do not have at this time. And
Hmm.
they have the skills to help you. What did Tishoy say? Let me see. My takeaway from this whole session: I need Jesus and my therapist.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
So you're
right.
going to please put Mario. Please put that the link or the flyer of that the church program also, so that other people can find it. Okay.
Okay.
If you don't have it right now, that's okay. We can put it on later, and you guys can
Sure.
can find it. Yeah, yeah. There is so much value to that. So much value to that. There are books. There are questionnaires. There are just all kind of different methods.
Hmm.
But being true to ourselves, right? And sometimes also when we get to a certain point where we're so clouded,
Yeah.
what we think is true, it's not. Let's
Right.
just face it. And let's
That's
just
right.
face it. Sometimes when we think we're okay, and science has shown, I always try to say that science has shown that
Uh-huh.
our thinking being clouded, when we think things are okay, when we think we have a handle on everything, sometimes we just don't. And
That's
we
right.
have people around us that are hinting, that are telling us. And it's okay to listen.
Yeah.
It's
That's
okay
right.
to listen and say, well, you know what? I think I'm okay, but I'm going to go and see, and just see what happens. See what happens. Take
That's
heed
it.
to counsel and advice and constructive constructive criticism.
Listen, I tell you, that is so spot on what you said. I'll give an example. I know we probably have to get off here, but
All right, well,
with the situation with our daughter, I think it was early last week, I started seeing some of the issues piling up.
mhm,
And I really, like, God knows, I just want to hold this girl healthy and whole. And what parent doesn't?
right.
But I began to reminisce about our last circumstance
Mhm, mhm.
and how it didn't end well. And
Naturally.
some of the issues that we're seeing in our daughter, we're seeing them come up
Mhm,
in our new daughter, and yet we didn't have the answers as to exactly what happened to
mhm,
Braylee, our other
mhm,
daughter.
mhm,
But we're seeing some of these things come up, and I started to check out and detach myself because
mhm,
I didn't want to deal with the reality that she may come out but not be okay,
mhm.
or that something may happen in this
Yeah,
process. And I
yeah.
feel like God was speaking to me, and he asked me a question through the story of Hezekiah.
Mhm,
And you know the story of Hezekiah. Hezekiah, great king, but at one point, prophet Isaiah comes to, and God comes to Isaiah and says, "Hey, tell Hezekiah to gather his things because he's going to die."
mhm.
And so he goes and delivers that message.
Right.
Hezekiah, the Bible says, hears the message, turns his face to the wall, which many scholars believe was the direction of the temple, and
Mhm,
he begins to talk to God about his own circumstance.
mhm.
And what I learned from there, this is in the midst of me thinking all of this, God pushes the pause button and downloads this story in my head again.
Yeah.
And what God was trying to tell me is he was trying to ask me the question, what if Hezekiah had accepted the word
Mhm.
secondhand from someone else
Mercy.
and not come to me himself?
Yes.
He would have got his house in order, and he would have died.
That's it.
But Hezekiah decided he wasn't going to take a secondhand word, even though it was from God. He was
Right.
going to talk to God himself about his circumstance. And
Mhm.
before he decided to hold on to the negative thought, he wanted to see what God could do in the end first. And
Mhm.
as a result of him choosing that thought pattern and that faith pattern, the
Mhm.
Lord added 15 more years to his life. So in the midst of me letting this little girl go prematurely, the Lord said, "Hey,
Right.
do you know what I'm going to do?
Right.
You know what I allowed before, but do you know what's going to happen at the end of this circumstance?" My answer was no. Then why are you canceling yourself and
Right.
your blessing before you even get to it? And he
Mm.
had to deal with me in that moment and say, "Listen, if you want it, you need to ask me for it. The doctors may have this prognosis. Your
Right.
boss might give you this word. What that secondhand circumstance or relaying of message is what it is. But if you want something from me, you come to me about it and hold on to see what I'm going to do. Can't I turn it around? Can't I turn that thing around in the blink of my eye?" And
Yeah.
so I
Wow.
said, I'm
Yeah.
going to go ahead, as the old Negro spiritual said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to open my mouth unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And there's no turning back. I'm going to see what the end is going to be. And so I've had to go through this journey leading up to today. And I
Wow.
just want to encourage somebody out there, unless you already can see the end of it, you owe yourself the opportunity to think positively about the outcome
Mm.
until you know otherwise. Yeah.
I have nothing else to say. Yes. 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 Many times, yes.
Praise God.
Yeah. Sometimes you just, that's it. But Tishore is gonna close the show for us. Mario, I
Man,
don't know you or your wife personally, but I remember seeing a whole community of people praying for your daughter and so happy for the new blessing. Congrats on your baby girl. And we
thank you
are
so
going
much.
to be full alignment, in full alignment with this.
Thank
Um,
you.
that's
Tashore, thank you so much.
I have
Yes.
nothing else to say because I want to end on this. I want to end on this.
Okay.
I want to end on this. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Tishore, for participating. Thank you for all of those who tuned in. We're going to put the information about the church program, about the
Yeah.
YouTube channel. All of that is going to be on. But I want to end on this high note of faith and of revelation. When God speaks, we listen.
Thank you.
And sometimes we have to take it in. And I need to
Yes.
take it in. You need to take it in. We all need to. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. This is the end of our podcast today. Live well and love.
Thank you.